more time.
Okay, we'll get this meeting started. This is the City of Gig Harbor's Design Review Board meeting for October 13th, 2022. And we usually start with a roll call. I'll start with myself, Darren Filan, and then I'll say your name. You can basically say here. So I'm kind of going across my my screen here. So Brianne.
Here.
Okay. Amy.
Here.
John.
Here.
Marlene. You're muted, Marlene. She was here. Okay, and then staff.
I am here.
Okay, Marlene, thank you. So Robin.
Yes.
Okay, and then Cindy.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
And-
perfect.
And we have Josh Stecker, city clerk. He is here tonight to
Okay.
review the bylaws with everyone and
Perfect.
anything else. So John, so here we go.
Okay. Okay, based on the agenda, we have some meeting minutes from, let's see here, this is, are these the appropriate ones all the way back from August 11th? Let's see here. No, that was,
Yes, those ones had gotten overlooked and they didn't get brought to the board for approval. So bringing those now.
so do we have a motion from board member to approve the minutes as written?
I'll go ahead and do it. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as they stand for August 11th, 2022 and September 22nd, 2022.
Did everybody get that second set of minutes? I know they were sent out, I think, later in the day today.
Yeah, one was after the other on the web link.
Okay.
I'll
Okay,
second.
and seconded. Any other comments, questions? Okay, we'll call for the question. All in favor of approving the minutes for August 11th, as well as, John, did you say it was this September
September 22nd.
22nd.
22nd? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's an aye from you, Marlene?
Aye.
Okay. Okay, minutes are approved as written. Okay, we'll move on to agenda items. So we'll start probably with, we've got one application tonight. We have a couple other things we're going to do prior to that, so I'll wait to hold on introducing the application. So this is an open public meeting. And if we have public members that want to make a comment, we'll have an opportunity for you to do that in the meeting. So Cindy will just let us know. Appearance of fairness, we want to make sure that we haven't had any ex parte communication regarding this application tonight. So I'd ask the board members, have you had any ex parte communication or written in regarding this application? You can
No.
just shake your head. Other than Marlene, I can't see you. So looks like there is none. And then taking into consideration the appearance of fairness doctrine, do any members of the DRP have any reason to recuse themselves from discussion and voting on this matter? That's good. And then we basically ask, we don't see, I believe, any members of the public. Is that correct, Cindy?
We have one, am I muted? We have one attendee.
Okay. All right. Well, I'd ask them as well as any member of the applicant team if they have any appearance of fairness concerns regarding any DRB member or any city staff member in regards to this proceeding.
David Bowe, I do not believe we have any issue.
Okay. Okay, being none, we can move on. So let's see, we have a couple of items, the bylaws we're going to review, and then we have some elections to get done before we get into the application. So I'll probably turn it over to Josh.
Okay, thanks, Darren. I'm going to do a screen share here really quickly and show you the bylaws that we currently have for the DRB, as soon as I can find them, they're there. So I don't know how familiar you are with your bylaws. It looks like they were last amended and adopted back in 2016. But we've had quite a number of changes since then. Probably the big change is that last spring in April, the city council met and they updated their own rules of procedure. And as part of that update, they incorporated some kind of uniform rules for all of the advisory boards, like the DRB and the Planning Commission and the Parks Commission, to try to just get all of the boards consistent on how they operate. And I'm just going to go through the bylaws that you have and just kind of point out where these are similar to what council has put in place and where they're a little bit different. Basically, what I'm steering this towards is because council has the procedures adopted already in their guidelines, which are adopted by council resolution, there really isn't a need for the DRB to have bylaws anymore. So the recommended motion would be for the DRB to repeal its bylaws, and we'll just stick with the guidelines that council's put forward. And just as far as the DRB having bylaws, there are only two city boards that actually have bylaws. The Planning Commission had theirs until we had this discussion last week, and they repealed theirs. And then the DRB has bylaws as well. The DRB is allowed to have bylaws for their historic preservation. The applications that you review for that, it's part of the city's municipal code that says that you can adopt bylaws for that. It's not a requirement, it's an optional thing. So I'm gonna go through these bylaws, and if you have any questions, just go ahead and interrupt me along the way, and I'll be happy to address anything that comes up. Article 1, the organization name, that's obviously in our Decarbon Municipal Code. You're established and your board is created in there. So that section is really redundant to our code. The official seat of the DRB is, of course, the city, the Civic Center when we're meeting in person, and then on Zoom if we have to meet online. Officers, so each board is allowed to have a chair and a vice chair by council guidelines. So it's really kind of the same thing that you have in here. The chair is the defunctory leader of the meetings, make sure the parliamentary procedure is followed, make sure that everything is done in accordance, which Darren has been doing for you now. And then the vice chair just fills in the duties of the chair when the chair is not present. So there really isn't anything in this section that isn't already covered in the council guidelines as well. Article 4, your schedule for regular meetings. Your regular meetings are is it first and third Thursday of each month, or second and fourth?
Second and fourth.
Second and fourth, yeah. At 5:30. That's provided for in the Open Public Meeting Act of the state of Washington. So you're in compliance there. Everything is good. You're at 5 o'clock on the second and fourth Thursdays. So there's really nothing in that needs to be memorialized in bylaws. One of the new things that council has put into place is that we do allow special meetings of our boards, but they need to be cleared by the mayor first. Special meetings generally mean that it's going to take extra staff time and support time. So council wants to make sure that everything that's any special meetings that are done because we have the staff available to do it. I don't think that's an issue with the DRB, because if you do ever have a special meeting, it would be because staff needs you to have one. The noticing of all meetings, that's pretty much all state law by the Open Public Meetings Act. So there's not really much that you need to have in your bylaws as far as how those are posted. Council guidelines provides that agendas are typically posted 5 days ahead of time for the meeting. And I don't think that's inconsistent at all with what you've been doing. Meeting attendance is something that council put into their guidelines last spring that they wanted to kind of get memorialized for the different commissions. Essentially, what council has said is that if any member is going to miss 3 or more consecutive meetings as unexcused absences, meaning you haven't reached out to staff to let them know that you're not going to be there, then at that point, then the mayor has the authority to step in and remove someone if the mayor feels it's appropriate to do that. So that's the attendance requirement for the design review board. And I think you're all pretty aware that if you're not going to be able to make a meeting, that just let Cindy or Michelle know, and then we can mark you as excused for pretty much any reason you need. The quorum of a committee is the majority of the appointed members of a committee. And it's a little bit confusing for the design review board, because your committee is kind of broken up into two separate sections. You have the regular design review board and then the historic preservation board. So for your regular meetings, a quorum is the majority of the 7 members. And then for your historic preservation applications, you have to have the 2 members. That's in the Gig Harbor Municipal Code, so it's not really something that you need to have a bylaws section to deal with. But that's one area where your board is unique. So another thing that I'll touch on briefly here, and it's really a developing thing, but one of the things that the city council put in their strategic plan was they would like to have the city have its own historic preservation committee. So that is something that we are actively working on, and it's really a requirement for our historic preservation activities of that the state requires of us. And we've just kind of melded it with the design review board in the past, and we're really finding that it's not appropriate for us to have that. So one of the things that I'm working with Carl on is restructuring the design review board so that there's a design review board separate from the Historic Preservation Commission. So all of the duties that the DRB has that are historic preservation related will be transferred over to that Historic Preservation Commission. And then we will separate the general design review board duties from that as well. That's something we're still ironing out the details of. And I think there will be instances where we have members that may be on both boards. So if you're interested in just the historic part of it and you want to be on that commission, there'd be an opportunity for that. But if you do want to be on both commissions, like I know John's been pretty active on both, that opportunity will be there too. So that is just something that's coming down the road. We're still working on the details of that, but once we get that underway, that will change these meeting requirements for the DRB. Motions and voting. This is all pretty much taken from Robert's Rules of Order and Parliamentary Procedure. I think you're all fairly familiar with how the motions work, and voting takes a majority of the board to pass a motion. One of the things that council rules talks about with parliamentary procedure is that we like all of our boards to follow Robert's Rules of Order, but we don't really want to stress that the boards get caught up in Robert's rules. It's really just a tool to help you get your business done. And if Robert's Rules of Order gets too complicated and you're not sure how to proceed correctly using parliamentary procedure, it's okay to veer off of that and just make sure that you're getting the business accomplished that you need to accomplish. This section 9 here talks about public records. Of course, all the records of the DRB are public and available to the public. And then the record of the meeting. This section refers to the audio recording of the meeting. Very soon, we are hoping to have all of these meetings back in person. But even once we're back in person, there's still going to be a Zoom component of all of our meetings. So once you're back in person, we'll have a camera and audio set up, and there'll be a full Zoom recording, and we'll allow residents to join the meeting by Zoom and comment by Zoom. So the record of the meeting is going to be the Zoom recording. We do have the technology in place now, so I'm thinking that probably as soon as next month, we'll be able to have everybody back in person again. Article 5 just talks about amending these bylaws, and that is the extent of it. So yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Staff's recommendation is that we should just repeal these bylaws since they're not really relevant anymore. But really, it doesn't hurt to have them if you feel like they're helpful.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So any comments from members? Sounds like we'll be covered with basically what's been established for city council. I would think we would probably take a lead from planning commission in regards to their action. Similarly, their responsibility seems to be a little bit more taxing in regards to setting policy than necessarily our advisory role. So I don't have any concern with repealing these.
Neither do I.
No problem here.
Yeah, if the board wants to go that route, then it would just be a motion to repeal the bylaws, and that would be all we need.
Okay, I'll make a motion to repeal the bylaws. Do I have a second?
I'll second that motion.
Okay, any further discussion? Okay, we'll call for the question. All in favor? Aye.
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 Amy, Marlene?
Aye.
Is that aye from you, Amy, or?
Aye.
Okay, got it. Okay. They've been repealed, at least with everybody that's here so far, so. Thanks, Josh, appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm guessing that probably in the near future, I'll be back probably with Carl to talk to you about what the HPC will look like and changes that might bring to you too.
Okay,
Really curious on that one.
right. So while we have
Yeah.
Robin, Josh, and Cindy
thanks,
here,
Mark.
I guess the next item was
Thank
chair
you, Josh.
elections. Do we need to have a full contingent of the DRB to have elections?
No, that's not required. You can go ahead and do that now.
Okay. All right, so we have any nomination? We just have two positions. We have a chair and a vice chair. Do we have any nominations for either of those two positions?
Darren, I'd like to nominate you for chair once again. You do a great job at it.
Okay, thank you. I was chair for about a decade, I think, or more, and so not too terribly complicated. But if anybody else would like to, have their hand at it, I'm more than welcome to step aside too. So just speak up. Any nominations for vice chair?
I think John is wonderful at it, especially when he's had to step in recently.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're learning from you guys.
Okay, anything else? Amy, Marlene, Brienne, any other suggestions, nominations? Okay. Okay, we'll just go over the first nominations. So all in favor, as myself being chair of the DRB. We'll call for the question. All in favor? I'm going to rate. I'm going to abstain.
Aye.
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 Okay. I guess I will be chair, and then all in favor of John Ashlock as vice chair.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
All right. Did we hear you, Marlene, on those?
You bet you did.
Okay, good. Okay, we're through the chair election, so it'll be myself as chair and John as vice chair moving forward until our terms are over, I presume. Okay, thank you. So Josh, I think, are you sticking around for this or?
I'll sign off for this part.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, now we're on to the applicant. Okay, so without taking a break, let's get moving. We have one application on the docket for tonight. This is Erickson Street, commercial office building located up at Erickson Street, not a specific site address just yet, up just off Kimball Drive. The application number is PLDR 220047. And this is to propose develop a new two-story commercial office building, approximately 17,000 square feet, along with surface parking, about 57 stalls. And with that, we will turn it over to Robin for the staff report.
Thank you so much. Robin Bolster Grant. I am a senior planner with the City of Gig Harbor. I apologize so much for the disembodied voice. I I come from, I'm sitting in a hotel room in Vancouver where we just wrapped up the Washington chapter of the APA conference. I've been having a few little technological glitches. So again, I'm sorry that you can't see my face. But here we are. So this is a design review pre-app, as everybody knows. The purpose of this is to allow the design review board to provide early input on potential development during the early stages of design, allowing the board to voice potential concerns or opportunities related to the site. This project did go through a pre-application meeting with Carl taking the lead last year, May of last year. And the project presented to your board today has incorporated much of the input that was provided last May. As stated, applicant is proposing a 2-story commercial office building on a vacant site, about 1.13 acres in area. The site is zoned general business or B2. The building again is roughly 17,000 square feet in area. The surrounding properties include the Hanger Clinic, which I think I might have misspelled in my staff report. Sorry about that. That's located to the west, also on B2 zoning. The city center is located to the north, and the zoning there is public institutional. And there are 2 apartment complexes, both to the east and to the south, and those are located on multifamily residentially zoned land, or R3. It is my understanding that the project proponents are looking specifically for input relating to the transition zone standards, although the site is, I should say, also located within the Willachet Pioneer Interchange Activity Center. I think they've so far done a pretty good job making sure that those requirements are met. So again, I think it's the zone transition that presents some concerns. And in my staff report, I laid out the code requirements for those standards and the list of elements that may qualify for deviations. Relief from the standards, specifically the 40-foot buffer. That can be achieved for project design that meets section 17.99190, and I've listed those in my report. If the project cannot meet subsections A through D of 17.99.190, the applicant may request alternative zone transition standards under 1799-200, which again, the applicant is seeking direction and input from your board. They have provided responses to each of the criteria under the alternative standards. And then finally, although the applicant did not request an analysis of additional design considerations, I thought it made sense to point out a few additional requirements, including the provision of common area and the provision calling for the frontage, 50% of the front facade to be located on the front setback line. And then I raised the issue having to do with shifts in wall and roof surfaces. It wasn't entirely clear that the design as proposed meets those standards. These additional considerations, again, are referenced purely as sort of an FYI and were not raised by the applicant. So that is my brief project introduction. I will do my best to answer any questions. For now, I will turn it over to the applicant and to your board for discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robin. Okay, well, before we have David give us his presentation, does the board have any questions before we start? Okay, David, go ahead and take it away. Give us your presentation cut outline for us.
Okay, hope you can hear me. Sometimes out in the ranch here, I can freeze up, those kind of things. So hopefully that won't happen. David Bowe Architect, 1130 Broadway, Suite 207, Tacoma, Washington, 98402, for the record. Been before you many times. Most recently with the Hardware History Museum. So it's great to see you all back again. And we're still doing Zoom, but it sounds like that's soon to be ended, at least from a public meeting standpoint. So looking forward to that. Yeah, I'm wondering, should I ask to share the screen to bring up some graphics? Because we're going to try to talk it through. It's going to get a little bit complicated.
Yeah, I think that'd be best.
Okay.
And you should have a green share screen button at the bottom of your screen, and it'll allow you to share the screen.
That's what I'm hoping for.
Okay.
So this is something we did, knowing we're going to go through zone transition standards. Again, those of you who I've worked with before, I'm a contextualist, so I like to have buildings that fit into their site as much as possible. And this is one of those, I don't want to say odd, but as noted, it's in the activity center. So that wants it to be straightforward, right on the front property line saying, hey, here I am, come, be part of the business community, walkable, retail shop. Those are all things the activity center is, but this is way down at the end, bumping up against the residential as noted. And so right away, you've got this kind of yin and yang, because while the activity standards are telling you really want to be really pedestrian friendly and right up, letting the world know you're there. The zone transitions are saying you should really cower away a little bit and be quiet and not make a point of being there. So that's really the kind of the rub of why we're going to getting your input ahead of time. So this was just looking at all of the different factors. And the 40-foot buffer, of course, is that's a really good buffer, and totally understand it when you're coming up against directly to residential. But the interesting aspect of this is the Laurelhurst, which is to the south here. It's over 120 or something, even to the property line. It is set way back from Erickson Street itself, and so you're even again trying to balance the activity center with the zoning. So this was kind of just looking at all of that. One of the things staff reports is we didn't get the height of the adjoining buildings. We do an average. I'm not sure how one can do that these days. Walking on with a tape measure onto somebody's private property, figure out what the height of things are, could be problematic. So I don't know if there's something on GIS that we're not aware of where we can get that information. But the Laurelwood apartments are 2-story with a pitched roof, so it is very comparably sized to what we're proposing. The Civic Center is probably much larger than what we were proposing, and then it's just a Norwegian wood facility, which I didn't realize that the Norwegian wood also includes the apartments that are to the south. They're all part of that same development. So they have 3 buildings on kind of the north half of their property, and then they have 2 buildings on the south and a little picnic area. It's kind of scary. That's between the two. So that was our site analysis. The parking along, part of the zone transition is to kind of look at what's around you. And the big thing is that the Norwegian Wood has all of their parking between the subject property and the building, except for just up here at the north. And it was noted that the ends of these buildings have no windows, probably for shear walls, and that's probably what they're there for, and for keeping, privacy between units. So there really isn't someone, overlooking the site, so to speak. Most of the view from these apartments are across their parking lot, then to the site. Still important, but not if that site had been flipped. I think we'd be having a different discussion. So that's the site context. And then the site, probably the site plan. So this is it, and the tree survey, which is included in. One of the things we have found over the years is that when you're taking out trees, you usually are not successful drawing a straight line and just from 30,000 feet and go, that's where the tree should be cut, because you can undermine root balls and not looking at the actual growth of the tree. And there are quite a grouping of the existing trees. We've done a survey. We're pretty confident we're going to meet maintaining the significant tree requirement. But looking at, well, wait a minute, where are these trees the healthiest? Where are they grouped such that we know their roots are all entwined to each other? This site has been exposed pretty much on its west side. So the trees there are, have been taking the hit in a sense of wind. And so we'll be removing some of those. So we like to put a building back where those trees were to help protect the root balls and have you. So we started looking at this, and then that's why the building, and knowing you have to do modulation, and that to actually, okay, we'll put the 20-foot setback lines in, but now let's look at the actual tree patterns. Where could we put a building where the foundation would be outside the drip ring of those trees? So that's why the form takes the way it does. The big issue, I think, which is a really good success, is that the proponents would like to use the existing driveway on the hangar property, or those of us who've been here a while, we always think of it as the gateway property for the Gateway newspaper. And this is their loading dock area over here, the former loading dock. And so to be able to use this access means no new driveway coming in, no headlights showing up where headlights never showed up before. So that is really a really good big asset, I think, for the surrounding properties that is going to be used. And then it also allows us, which I was on that previous diagram, to connect through with hangar for pedestrian access through the property, so that there potentially could be overflow parking. The hangar property is not 100% parked, and so there's potential for any overflow. So not having to overly create a parking lot that's massive, we're able to just balance it right. But also have this, like I said, this pedestrian connection through the hangar property, and then having a good pedestrian connection right along Erickson. The main entrance would be a kind of flow through lobby, so it would have an entrance door on the south, door on the north. And the building again just follows this form to try to navigate its way around. So the big issue is the 40-foot hard and fast, or is this approach of kind of actually looking at it? And we need to even go further and do an analysis in the field of those trees. We did a quick site walk to kind of go, yeah, some of these got to go. We got some madronas that are dying. Those got to go. But we would actually dial down to actually with an arborist to figure out exactly, hey, that's a really good group that needs to stay. So that's the one big issue that we'd like to get your input on that. And then like the general parking, it's great. The building's going to totally green 100% from Erickson, ideal. And then we're backing up parking on both sides, parking to the hangar property, and then parking also to the Norwegian wood. And the elevation, I think, unless somebody's got questions, I'll keep going. Elevation wise, this is the residential side facing Norwegian wood, trying to keep the mass down. One of the questions that Robin brought up was, I'm not sure you're meeting the roof modulation, and what we're proposing here does not. We can meet the roof modulation. It makes the building bigger because we have to get 5 feet variation, so we could add dormers. And this is where I'm kind of, boy, if this was up on Kimball, no problem. Want to be a more of a prominent parcel type location. Here, it's like, I don't want to make artificially the roof in a sense bigger and the height bigger when it's got the big buffer of existing trees, and I'd rather keep the building mass smaller. So that was, and we're not off by much, but it doesn't prescriptively meet the 80-foot requirement. We'll get a little bit of modulation at the entrance, and then you don't care about that. That's Rosedale Hall. Yeah, I'm not sure where that elevation popped up. There we go. And then this is the elevation facing the street. And you can see I put these little lines here because those are all the existing trunks of the existing trees that are going to be maintained. And those, not the width, but just show the location of all of them. So yeah, that's the real big question of, like, sure, we could put these bigger dormers on and make the building bigger so that we can get that 5-foot change. But I was kind of leaning towards, oh, let's keep the roof low as we can, and if we exceed that, we'll let the trees be the variation on that. So those are kind of the overarching items. We'll be breaking it up with windows. These are just more conceptual, but I don't have any problems. I think meeting the solid void relationship or the pattern of the windows or all those things. Those are different materials. I think the owners, developers are in there anyways. They also want to show off the craftsmen of what their company can do. So I think having some heavy timber accents and some pretty cool, curved plates with wood columns, at the entrances to just kind of show that, hey, this company can really build exquisite buildings. So that's another current that's going through that. So I should probably shut up now and let you guys let me know your thoughts. Unless Mickey or Max, you had any questions or things I skipped over.
No, thanks, David. I think you covered it.
This is Mickey, concur.
And I'll try to run if anybody wants to look at a specific drawing. I will attempt to find it.
Okay, we'll start with discussion. So, David, is your intent you're going to seek the alternative zone transition standards? So basically the 13 or so points we got to sort of look at overall.
Yeah, again, most of them, especially with the things locating the driveway, where maintaining the existing driveway, making that pedestrian connection. I think we're going to get to almost all of them, pretty reasonably without too much effort.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think given the context, maybe starting, with how the building is placed and being set back off of Erickson Street, you could maybe argue this is kind of a mixed mash of older developments that are here that are really kind of set in more of a park-like setting. So I would concur with you, David, that that bringing the building up forward to the property line is not necessarily, it would stand alone as the only building in this, it's the only one really at this point, that would fill a buildable lot. Everything else looks like it's fairly well developed in that zone. So it would be unique standing there. I don't know if it would, unless there was the potential of future development that could carry on that sort of language, but that's, I don't know, I guess thinking about how long these buildings have been here and what we have, at this point, it seems like it's compatible with what's happening in that zone. It's a little bit quiet down that street. I don't even know much about what's going on down Erickson. If you just drive by it on Kimball, you probably don't even realize that it exists.
Yeah, I concur. There's actually noted here there's a gate, so you can't even get through Erickson unless you're the fire department with a key. You can't get through, or maybe it's only open at special times. But there is a nursing home further down. I think it's McDonald's, and it gets quite a bit of traffic. My wife's grandmother was in that facility for some time, and so it was always weird. You're kind of like, where are we going? But yeah, I totally concur. And the interesting thing is when you look at the Norwegian wood and its facade elevation, we would be very similar. What was proposed would be very similar and further back than that. So there would be, with trees on the way, of course, but there would be very, I think, compatible.
Well, looking at your footprint compared to, the apartments are pretty, understated in regards. Their roof lines are 100, a little over 100 feet long, and it looks like about 85 feet long from what I can, get from Google. So it doesn't seem like, what you're proposing so far, even though it may sort of exceed that that 80-foot threshold a bit, Dave, how far does it exceed, David? It seems like it's, within the contextual range of looking at these other buildings.
Yeah, about 20 feet. So it's not,
Yeah.
not like doubling it or anything like that. And really the only visible side, I think, that you will pick that up will be on the north side of the building, which is internal to the site. I think from especially from Erickson, I don't think you would pick that up at all. And I really like the idea, more of a little bit modernist, because we do have the hangar building, which is more contemporary, of having this crisp line and then having the modulation as it comes out towards the trees, kind of being a nice point counterpoint.
So what is the relationship for this this access? Is the property going to grant an easement for access? How does that work?
Correct. The property is got common ownership, and I actually believe that's why this is zoned the activity center, because not to throw Osgothorpe or whoever under the bus many years ago, but I think when they were looking, obviously up on Kimball, that property, the hangar property, the gateway property, makes total sense to be in the activity center. But then they would be subdividing ownership into two different zones, and so I think it was more of, oh man, if we really want to do that, why don't we just suck that in, even though it really extends way beyond what one would normally think of as the activity zone on Kimball. I think that was just more of a, well, if we're going to put the one piece of the property under the ownership into the activity center, we probably should suck the other one into. So I think that's where this, I mean, I don't know that for fact, but when you look at the map, it's like, oh, because it does jog when you go across Erickson Street, it jogs way back to the more properties that front on Kimball. So that's my forensic opinion.
Okay. Well, I think from a comprehensive planning standpoint in regards to interconnectivity of vehicular traffic from one site to another and reduction of driveways and pedestrian connections, I think this is, you're not having to arm wrestle you to get, this connection. So I think that's a good aspect of the current proposed design that strongly supports those elements of the comp plan. So, I think that bodes well for this development, given that it's narrow. A lot of times we see, driveway after driveway, and it sort of disrupts that vegetative sort of line along Erickson. So I think that's a good maneuver on your part. Maybe it's advantageous based on the property ownership. All right, I've talked enough. I'll get some other comments from design review board members on this.
I have a question. I appreciate the pedestrian access, the consideration for pedestrian access in two places with this. I think that that's really thoughtful. My question relates to the common area requirement, and I think the language in here says it requires approximately 820 square feet based on the development. Can you talk about how, and it isn't provided at this level, but would be factored into that pedestrian connection? Can you talk a little bit about what that open space would look like?
Well, we haven't really dug into it. Wasn't a question. I'm confident we can figure something out. The other thought we were bouncing around was, and maybe I need to go back to this plan. There's kind of unused area now. I know it's not on the property, but it's in the activity center. So this would be probably more of a, how can you do this or not? But developing something that's kind of a counterpoint to this project, because this is going to be a very dark site. It's going to, building surrounded by 30-foot minimum buffer of mature trees. Everything to the north of the building will be in shade, really close to the building. And so as a place to sit outside and activity center, we can build it, but will they come? I'm a Midwesterner by birth, and higher education. But my wife's grandmother, when I met her, said, "Oh, you'll love the Pacific Northwest on the hottest day of the year. Sit in the shade, put a sweater on." Used to be that way, not so much the last couple of years. But the point being is, I think there's opportunity to really redevelop part of the hangar, put in a much bigger activity center that has more light, sunshine, that could really be between the two buildings. So I don't know what's all required with that, but that's the things we would probably look into to kind of make it better than just saying, well, we've allocated some of the undergrowth under these trees as an open area. And I'm one from an urban design standpoint, even though this is not an urban site, but have activity areas that have warmth and are actually used versus we're meeting that requirement and check it off the list. So, but not too much thought has gone into it, so I can't really give you. Next time we come before you, we'll have it all figured out.
Yeah, good point, Brianne. I think, David, if you were looking for maybe some better solar exposure, maybe, giving some kind of strength or prominence, maybe at Erickson Street there or your sidewalk connection, maybe that could be amplified, remove some of that, vegetative buffer there to sort of, make more of a presence for the building, allow it to actually be seen, develop some kind of an entry pedestrian friendly sort of sequence there, and maybe an outdoor space as it would have the right solar orientation, and then, maybe announce the building a little bit better.
Absolutely. We also have to balance that with the world we live in and having security being a much bigger issue, especially with outdoor spaces. There have on this site, because it's in woods, there have been people camping. So those are just, again, where can we have eyes on that open space so that people who are in it feel safe? I'm a big step-head guy, crime prevention design. So that's something where I'm always going to be like, well, what's the delinquent in me going to do with that space? So.
I do think, to Darren's point, I think that pedestrian access off of Erickson, I think opening that up a little bit might actually help with your sightlines and SEPTED considerations, because otherwise it just from the conceptual, it looks like a pretty narrow pedestrian path, and that opening that up a little bit might bring more eyes into that space as well, and make it a little bit more prominent. But I'm pretty familiar with this couple block stretch, and it's mostly, people walking to the trail head there, or it's not a really active area, but I also I walk it pretty often, and I had to do a double take and really try to remember if there was actually a lot there when I looked at it on a map. So it is, I appreciate you tucking it away, but I do think trying to get some of that open space right on the frontage there might bring a little bit more activation to that space, and hopefully help with some of that eyes on the space as well. So that's all I've got with that. Thank you.
Okay, no, that's a really good point. And I think this, because I did the overlay, the trees that are along the west side, so facing the activity center, are the sparsest of the trees because of the, when they put in the gateway building now hangar, they did do some clear cutting in there. So I think that's another reason why we put the entrance on that side. Make it, we'd flip the whole thing and put the entrance on that side, marking by the building to get to it. I think, like, no, we'll still keep the activity on the west side. And so you're actually right. Opening that up will also allow someone coming down the road to see the building, not just look at a sign that says two buildings, or you have to, it's visible, and that will also help set that. So really good point. Thanks.
So David, where do you see services, trash, and that? Is it going to be shared with the adjacent property, or do you anticipate that being on this property itself?
Yeah, we're a little bit of both, because we do have this big area here for anything large, can go over at hangar. So, you know, it's not broke, why fix it. But then we are going to have a covered area that's here on the back corner of the building to put those items. So they're screened, and that's where we have the biggest buffer again to the residential property in their cars. It's interesting, they actually have their trash enclosure right here. So I'm not saying we're backing up trash to trash, but we're at least, you know, doing something similar. So that was the thought on servicing, but we haven't gone and talked to the refuse folks yet and figure out what vehicle would be used, but that's the basic concept.
Okay.
So on the vegetative buffer between the apartments, looks like they have a perimeter fence going around.
Correct. We're proposing a really nice fence, something that's not easily tagged, to help us with multiple things, but one is just headlights.
Definitely want to see samples of that because again, the apartments will be looking at across the parking lot, but to trees, and now they are partnered out to a wall of a fence too. So
they do have some landscaping between the fence and also I think I made a note there. That's just a line. We're going to have to look at where existing trees are, and it's going to have to bob and weave, and it's because if we just make the fence a line, it's going to be going through significant trees, and so there's going to be lots of maneuvering of that. So I think it'll break it up that you won't get a big stretch of long fence because it won't physically be able to be constructed that way.
good, some definitely better visualization. That would be cool. Driveway entry, I definitely like it where it's at. Using the shared space, I think that's a smart use on that one. And looking at the map, the city building, it doesn't look like any, even though the large plane of the roofing view from the north isn't the prettiest, it doesn't look like there's much city-wise I would be able to see it from that adjacent lot either. So I don't have much issue on that side. The trees on the street side for Erickson, mostly evergreens, I'm guessing. Limbing going to be going on with the trees to open up the view a little bit more. It's a question of how much that large plane of the roof line will actually be visible. I mean, potentially could add a cross gable on the front that might end up changing a little bit to break it up, still have the length at the top so you don't have to do the dormer. But on the front little bump down section, if there's a cross gable, it'll give the illusion of it be broken up more. I don't know, just a thought on that one. But definitely want to have visualization where branches are going to be and how much that roof's truly visible.
Yeah, and part of it is realizing that we're going to be, you know, that roof's just going to get feet from trees and pine cones and the dust and all the pollen and all the different things that are going to happen. So our thought was, again, making it simple from a ridge standpoint, but really do the modulation as it reaches out towards the street. So that if we do limit up, we probably would only limit up, you know, approximately to the eve line, because there wouldn't really be much point after that. But we did look at a gable, but then it was, well, now we're starting to, I mean, normally, you know, a gable says, you know, entry, usually, you know, they can be smaller or hip gables, but we're trying to stay with kind of the simple roof we can, just to, again, let it go away, trying to balance that with you know, with context.
Thanks.
Marlene, Amy, any comments?
I mean, I know this is preliminary, so lighting hasn't really been thought out, but that was one of my initial thoughts, was basically the property itself. I love that you're keeping the trees on Erickson, but again, I agree with what's already been discussed, that it feels like it might be a little too hidden, and it might be nice to see a little bit of the front entrance and some of the architecture. But the lighting in the parking lot for people who are living next door to that, I don't know what kind of considerations you guys are taking so that it's not suddenly, you know, lit up. I know there's going to be a buffer between the trees, but I'm curious if there's any discussion about that situation, just because sometimes when you're in an apartment complex and something pops up next door, all of a sudden you have these large lights through a parking lot, and it becomes kind of, I mean, I know it's a safety thing, but it's also sort of, you know, it's an additional amount of light that's coming into your home. So That was
was-
the only thing that I was looking at. I think that the entrance, the shared entrance is wonderful. I would just agree that a little bit more opening off of Eric Street would actually be nice. The building itself it'd be great to be able to see a little bit of it from the street.
So having developed and designed quite a few projects in Gig Harbor, we will be required to make sure we don't have any light throw off the site. And the light fixtures today, even in the past 10 years, with the shielding that they can do and the directional aspect of it. So that will all be part. There'll be a lighting plan that's done to show exactly where those light levels are. But we will be, in a sense, we're in a sense keep throwing the light as much as possible from the east to the west, and that will be something we have to work out. But I totally agree. If there wasn't a light there before, and all of a sudden, wait a minute, I can go across my room now or my unit and not turn the lights on because there's so much glare coming from the new development. That's not where we're going to be going. We're going to have to really make sure everything is thrown from a light standpoint, from the east side to the west side. But yeah, really good point. Not something you do at the last minute. It's something that has to be incorporated as we finalize where trees are going in those aspects. Thank you.
So in talking about lighting and looking at the sort of the views along Erickson Street there, it looks like the city standards of curb gutter sidewalk and then light poles are on the south side of Erickson, but I don't see anything along the north side. And I'm wondering if the you obviously, David, I presume we're going to be doing all frontage improvements there and curb gutter sidewalk. I'm just wondering if again, looking at the you have city standards for lighting along the sidewalk. I would think that we could probably come up with something fairly modest for minimum light book handles for that parking lot also in the back, and I mean, there's not much from a security standpoint. I'm not seeing that there's any lighting per se, in the apartments, and the lighting that's there looks like it's the old school sort of in your face sidewall mounted. And so I would think obviously, David, the standards here for downward directional, and not having any sort of light migrating off the site, plus the buffer. I don't know. I think that seems like it's reasonable. At least your parking field is, for the most part, adjacent the parking field of the apartments, with the exception of the end wall, one of the apartments. But I don't believe there's any windows on the end of that building. So
Correct. Correct. There are no windows on the end of that building. And it, we'll be looking at the lighting and whatever the street with the improvements along Erickson. We'll do what the code requires us to do. But that's again another reason to go back to what I'm hearing for all of you saying so far, that entrance, especially on the south, opening it up a little bit more. Maybe that's where the light, you really kind of make that with indirect lighting, but you really make that a feature. So at nighttime, and then the other thing is this is not a medical building. I think there was a question staff report on parking, medical, dental. Nope, that's hangar. This is looking at truly an office building. So it's used as an office building versus something that's it's mainly quiet on Saturday and Sundays, and it's normally 7:30 to 5, kind of up to 7 or 6 to 6 or whatever. So it's not something that's in a sense going to be a nuisance from a use standpoint, even though it may be allowed in the activity center. So I think there's that aspect too, looking at it and light levels when they need to be the brightest, when they can be maybe with the sensors and everything we have and the timers. There's just so much ability to really orchestrate exactly for the right time.
mm-hmm. All right. Any other Marlene, you got any comments?
Yeah. I'm going to echo what a lot of you said. There's a lot of really good moves here. Oh, this is my neighborhood. So I'm very familiar with this site. I'm gonna echo that I like the shared driveway and the shared walkway, and I like that you are really thinking, since you have the opportunity that it's the same owner, you are thinking of how this connects to the Hanger Clinic. And just mentioning with the public space aspect, the Hanger Clinic actually has a little walkway. You could circle the whole building around the walkway as it is. The way that the growth is, it's not particularly inviting. There's also a pretty big plaza in the front of that building that is also really underused. So I guess I would urge you, when you think about the project, to think about how those two sites can come together to be a place that is more inviting to the public, who there is actually quite a bit of pedestrian traffic. There are a lot of people who walk dogs down McDonald. And because there are places through there where pedestrians can go and cars can't, like the side street in front of those residences and kind of working your way to the trail, there is actually quite a bit of pedestrian area there. So it would be great if you thought of both sites as an opportunity to create a resting spot or a point of interest for the people who use the buildings and the people who walk by the buildings. I like the moves of the tree retention, and yeah, I agree. Maybe the sidewalk, it's hard to say what, whatever you've just shaded it in this green. Maybe there is more opportunity to make your pedestrian entrance from Erickson a little bit more inviting by maybe opening that up a bit there. Let's see, I guess the other thing to mention is that the Hanger Clinic, since it has not been the gateway, most of those parking spots are empty most of the time. I've played ball with my dog in that parking lot. It is so very underused, and this might be a question for the city, whether both of those sites could be looked at together, and possibly you could get some sort of reduction in parking, which would give you an opportunity to retain more trees and create a better public space.
Thanks for that. It's always best to get local input. So thank you for that. We'll put up signs that say no dogs allowed on the pedestrian crosswalk. No dog, no ball games in parking lots. So thanks for bringing that up.
So David, can you speak up just maybe one point in regards to the architecture? Seems like, with the larger roof forms, kind of more that residential sort of, gable lines that are, sort of defining that top of the building. And whereas, that I think helps transition to the apartments, I think a little nicer, but then I'm just wondering about with the activity center and looking at, the hangar building next to it, how does that sort of speak to that building as well?
Yeah, I didn't really get into that so much. I was probably thinking more of the pedestrian connection and the activity center, and like we were discussing, maybe how the open spaces, activity areas can be tied together. I was thinking more of that the architectural interest and was on the west side that you would see, obviously, as you approach the building, down Erickson, coming from the west to the east, and really kind of making that be the feature. And then the goal is the rest of the building, in a sense, disappears into the trees, at least from the public side of the building. So haven't really thought about, the hangar's got flat roofs and got a serpentine curve, and it's got, got stuff going on, but we weren't trying to, again, if I do that, that won't be real compatible with being the residential. So I kind of went more on the residential side, and as the building goes to the west, then it starts to get a little bit more engaged in modulation vertically.
Mm-hmm.
Big E.
Okay.
I love this is my personal thing. I love big eaves in a wooded setting. You know, it just when you see the windows at nighttime, you know, in the dark, they're kind of glowing out from with the underneath the big roof, so to speak. So that was kind of the imagery that we were bouncing around.
Well, I think, you know, if that's sort of the look and feel, and then I'll be, you know, sort of up to you. I can understand why, you know, the nod towards those roof lines. I think relative to the landscape, and again, looking at, you know, along Erickson, you know, the requirement of trying to get the building and defining some frontage, I think could look and maybe be, you know, obviously I see some drones and some other things that are a little bit maybe kind of awkward, you know, in those spaces. Maybe it ends up being, you know, thinned a bit, you know, so that building, you know, in one sense does have some presence to Erickson. And
Yeah. Kind of this whole area right in here.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
You know, I think just getting, you know, it's a nice balance. You know, once the curb gutter and sidewalks and everything are placed in there, it'll kind of have this a little more of a formal, you know, feel, you know, coming right up against what looks to be almost park-like. So they almost seem like that, I know the gravel that's there now, it seems like with the rolled asphalt curb seems more appropriate. So, so it's like trying to find that balance between, you know, putting in something that looks a little more formal, you know, as you look across the other side and you see, you know, grass and, you know, it's just a little, find that balance between that, you know, and I think opening it up, maybe limiting it up, maybe there's some examples, you know, as you're heading down Soundview, you know, some of the apartments that are set back, they still have very mature, you know, fir trees and such, but maybe it has some lawn or some other things or some more sustainable, you know, low ground cover or things from a landscaping plan. But, you know, I think that from Erickson, don't just maybe rely on it being just all just natural there. Just, I think, retain the trees and then do a pretty good landscaping plan, you know, along Erickson that, and again, maybe allows you to see that building a little more.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously we didn't want to start doing all that if you guys looked at this and said, nope, 40-foot buffer, that's what we got to do. You know, like that's why we're going through this, because it's nice to get this input from a design direction so that we're not spinning our wheels and having to come back to you and again and again and again. You want to do it now? Want to do the one where, you know, when we do the full presentation and you say, way to go.
Okay, I don't know if there's anything else in the 13 points of the alternative zone transition standards. Anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to hear about, David or Robin?
Sorry about that. Nobody ever calls me out here, so. But it's probably a political campaign. So. Yeah, I think it's just getting your, you know, that, hey, this approaching the modulation and the setback this way, in some ways, you're almost, what I'm hearing is that I'm almost being too conservative, especially given that activity requirement to have the access and a little more presentation. But I'm not thinking we're going to bring the building necessarily any closer, because we still want to, you know, really recognize, you know, that the buffering is an important element. But through thinning and through how that whole entranceway comes, to be fully honest, I was so concerned on getting the number of percentage of significant trees that I left as many in as I possibly could, just because we want to make sure we meet that. And even with this plan, we're over the percentage that we need to be. Not that we want to bring it right down to that, but I always want to say, well, let's start. Worst case scenario is like, these are all the trees we have to keep. So we do have a little bankroll or something, inventory that we can play with a little bit. But the pushback on that is these are just little drawings, you know, survey telling us the size, caliper, and the species. We need to go out and make sure that, you know, they're not leaning over and they're going to fall and say, well, that one's got to go. So there's going to be a lot of that, whittling those numbers down as well, and probably in a sense thinning some of those out. So and then if the ridge line is, you know, do the best, it's not, you know, I mean, is it preferable to have a little bit longer ridge line but not have to go and add you know, additional height? And I know the dormer would be an option, but that still is adding height because it's got to go up at least 5 feet beyond the ridge line, and we don't need the height. So it's like we don't need the height, and we want to be, you know, respectful to the residential uses that they're joining. I would prefer to, in a sense, err with a longer ridge line, at least on the top of the roof. We're still modulating, you know, on the E line. That will not be an issue. Just be on the very ridge line of the roof. If this design direction is like, yeah, we need to see, you know, it's going to be in the details where we know it works, but just from a general direction.
Okay. All right, any last comments from members? Okay. Well, David, thanks for bringing this to us. I always appreciate the pre-application process where you can kind of get us as a little bit of a sounding board for some initial concepts. I think all in all, I think everybody is, won't speak for them, you know, directly, but I think everybody is in favor of kind of the direction you're going. So look forward to the project.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for your time. I wish, you know, the Mariners had won today, but, you know, they're playing an awfully good team. So
yeah. It's not over till it's over.
Not over till it's over. And it should be a crazy day in Seattle on Saturday and hopefully Sunday. So again, thanks for your time. Thanks staff report. And I look forward to bringing this forward to you probably this winter.
All right. Thank you, David. Okay. We could maybe we have any upcoming meetings, Cindy or Robin, that you know about?
No, the next meeting, which was October, lost my little calendar. I believe it's October 27th. Was canceled. We don't have a project for that one, but it is. Yeah, it was
Okay.
October 27th, and we don't have a project, so no meeting that night.
Okay. So there's the potential of one in early November, and then typically our second November meeting is usually canceled.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Any other comments for the good of the order? I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Good night.
All right. Good discussion, good meeting. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Good night,
Thank you,
everyone. Thank
folks.
you.
Take care.
Everybody.